Welcome back to another Criterion Corner. This is our third episode, and today we're going to be talking about the incredible film by the great Karel Zeman. It's called Journey to the Beginning of Time. Wow. I almost mentioned what it was clearly inspired by, but Journey to the Beginning of Time, I'm going to be talking about today with my good bunny, I cannot speak tonight. My good buddy, Connor Nielsen, back again. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing very, very well. We are right now on YouTube. We are basically in our own boat traveling to a very early film in cinema, or at least it certainly feels that way. 1955, very long time ago. Color, but it certainly has an old soul, even I think by 1955 standards.
Absolutely. And by total random happenstance, as they say, 1955, same as our second episode. Same as Diabolique.
Oh, whoa.
Same year as Diabolique. So very, very different films, different audiences, I would say, but both excellent films, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it. So before we get started, what was how did you hear about this film? Because I'll go into it in a little bit. But I'll go ahead and say we both know about it because of the fabulous Criterion release that is amazing, and I'm so glad they put this out. This is 3 of his films. I wish they would put out more of his films because he's a filmmaker that I really want to check out, and he's got I think he has 24 films, but some of those are shorts. But I want to check out all of his stuff because he's really cool. But yeah, let me know how you heard about him.
I actually heard about all of these movies from you.
Oh,
because
you're welcome.
Thank
Not
you.
to share my opinions on the
because
films too early, but
this is a set that you had sent me because before this channel even existed, you and I enjoyed talking about physical media, and you had floated around this idea of wanting to eventually do some kind of video about top 10 box. You had said this will be number 1 on that list. And because you did that, I thought, well, shoot, I better go get it then. So I did, and that was on one of Criterion's flash sales. I thought, it was wild because when I picked this up, I realized it was somewhat recent from Criterion. I believe this is a 2019 installment from them because this is Spy number 1015, and they hit number 1000 in 2019, if I remember correctly. Maybe this was an early 2020 installment. I can't remember when exactly this came out, but I thought it was a little interesting because every month I try to make an effort to see what Criterion is releasing, and for whatever reason I thought this must have been released many months or years earlier, but this came out while I was actively collecting Criterion, and for whatever reason it just completely wasn't on my radar. And so you kind of raising my awareness to it certainly piqued my interest. So that's just basically this set, and knowing you is the reason I even know anything about these films. And well, since we're talking about Journey to the Beginning of Time, this one specifically.
oh, perfect. Well, that's good. I'm glad I could help you out. This is actually, this is actually my first Criterion that I bought from them specifically. I had 2 that I found at a Half Price Books. That was Pan's Labyrinth and Lord of the Flies. And I still haven't watched Lord of the Flies. I really want to, but Pan's Labyrinth was great. This was the first one I bought full price from Criterion. I say full price. Like you, I also got it in a flash sale. So it was, is it about $50? Is this 100 standard? And then $50 for the flash sale or something like that? Okay. Okay, I can't remember how much I paid for it, but I was very glad I did. It was a huge risk to get something like this from Criterion's site because they have shipping problems sometimes, I've heard. And you can see the bottom's a little dented, but that's just kind of standard for this kind of cardboard digipack box set. But I've talked about this set already. in our top 10 box set video. It did actually end up making my number one. So high praise, but it's so cool. This is the movie we're talking about today, which is Journey to the Beginning of Time, and it's got this awesome fold-out pop-up art, and all three movies in here have that. And there's some cool bonus features with some of his short films, which I haven't got to yet, and I'm excited to. There's actually a Christmas one, so I'm going to try to check that out this year for Christmas time. But yes, this is such a cool box set. That's the first time I heard of it. I actually don't even know how. I think I may have been looking at Letterboxd and looking at like fantasy films, and like one of those came up, and then I looked it up and I was like, oh, there's Criterion with 2 other fantasy films also. So I actually don't remember exactly how I found out about it, but I'm really glad I did, because I've watched all 3 of these now. I watched all 3 of them in like a 2-week span last year. I loved every single one of them for different reasons. They're all really, really good. I love his style. But we'll talk about all that in a minute. But so we're talking about Journey to the Beginning of Time, which I guess I can give a quick synopsis. I mean, it's the quickest synopsis of any film, really. I think it's literally, I'll just read it off Letterboxd. 4 schoolboys go on an awe-inspiring expedition back through time where they behold landscapes and creatures that have long since vanished from the earth. And that's it, man. It's a super simple story. Not much to it, plot-wise or anything, but it's just beautiful to look at. Like, did you have the same experience with me? I'll just go ahead and jump right out the gate. Do you love the? I mean, I love the cinematography. I love. We'll talk about it. Go ahead. I'm just gonna gush, so you go ahead and go.
So, do you want me to just talk about my experience with the movie, or that specific kind of like craft of it?
Yeah, give first impressions, and then we can get into specific details, kind of like we did with Beauty and the Beast. A very similar kind of experience for me. Different vibe, but.
Yeah, I had an interesting response to this movie, because I would say I enjoyed it, but it's also a little bit of, because it's something that I don't typically see anymore. Like it's such a different kind of movie, and when I was reading this essay, the Storm of Craft by Michael Atkinson, in this very cool.
Yeah, this comes.
Sort of, it's meant to.
This comes with the box set. It's like look like a newspaper type thing. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm. But what Michael Atkinson writes about is he's talking about how Karel Zeman belonged. It starts off with Karel Zeman belonged to an obsessive fringe fellowship of movie makers that stretched right back to the medium's first formative days, a lineage of auteurs who believed in cinema as a full-blown daydream machine capable of realizing inhabitable fantasies. These were filmmakers, practical effects, adepts, animators of various stripes, and other hands-on world builders who thought of their movies less as stories than as objects, as handicrafts, as looking-glass manifestations of the bygone interior worlds of nursery fiction, Victorian illustration, puppet theater, snow globes, dollhouses, and other forms of child's play. And I think that is a perfect way of sort of describing the way this is made. It's sort of meant to resemble a slideshow, I would say, is the best way of describing it. Is you're on the expedition with these people, but not really. You're sort of it's sort of like it's like a slideshow that's 360 degrees, and like it plays out, and
like a diorama.
Sort of, yeah, like a diorama would be a good way of putting it. And actually, the filmmaker who's working today that I would compare the most visually, stylistically to this film would actually be Wes Anderson.
That's so awesome that you actually made that connection. I want to talk about that too. So go ahead and go into that.
That being said, I don't know, like, how often I will go back to this. It wasn't something I was crazy about, but I still enjoyed it. And there are certain aspects to my viewing experience that I need to actually have your interpretation of, or your explaining of, because the plottiest elements of this, my disc was scratched and skipped over.
Oh no, that's horrendous. How dare they? You got it from Barnes & Noble?
I got this actually from the flash sale, so directly from Criterion. So I want to maybe hit them up and see they might send me another one, because this is the first time I've ever played this disc, and there is one scratch I'm looking at right now that I think might be the culprit.
Oh man, that's such a bummer.
Because like they literally get to the end and they're like, look, here's the trilobite. What did you do with the other one? And then it froze, and I was like, what? Are you kidding me? So that was a little frustrating. And then there was the other aspect when the youngest, the littlest boy, he is kind of on the outs with the others. He is, he always goes off on his own, and that starts to annoy the others. And then he has the log book, and then it just cuts ahead, and he's given them back, and they're all like made peace.
Oh no! Okay,
I would have liked to have seen that scene, so maybe you could fill those gaps in for me. But I guess just without those in there, this isn't much of a story or like a character piece. It is more about the concept of adventure, and
exactly.
Feels like when you're with your friends and you're a kid and you're fantasizing about traveling, or you're fantasizing about going on some kind of great expedition. I like how this champions science. I like how this champions things and passions that, while this is a fantasy, it champions enthusiasm for real things that kids could go on to pursue. So I like that a lot.
Yes. Okay. You're making me want to go in a million different directions. But I'll talk about because First, I'll talk about what I was expecting from you, because I know this doesn't really fit. This is more my thing, I would think, than your thing from knowing what I know about you. But I did want to get it in here, and this is actually your idea, because if you're following along with our monthly movie challenges, we're doing adventure movies this month. And so Connor's like, hey, we should pop in one of those Karel Zeman movies, because those are this is the definition of an adventure movie. So I was really glad you brought that up, because it fits in perfectly, and it fits in perfectly with what I've been watching this month, because I've been watching a lot of Ray Harryhausen and those kind of earlier films, and Karel Zeman totally should be on the same pedestal as Ray Harryhausen, Georges Méliès, a lot of similar filmmaking styles in those. He was definitely looking at him. Even John Svankmajer, who I've talked about here a little bit. But yes, so I was excited. This kind of, not only did it line up with our last pick, but it also lined up perfectly with the adventure movie challenge that we're doing this month. So I think this was a perfect fit. I'm really glad you recommended it. I'm glad we started with this one, just because it's a simpler one. It's it's a really good, I'm glad they added on this, because it's a really good introduction to Zeman's style, and gets you in that mindset. So when you watch his second film, which I think you'll like even better, which uses all the techniques he uses here, but ramped up to 11, and it looks, every single frame looks like a piece of artwork, and it's amazing. But yeah, so this is definitely a low key just journey. I mean, it's just a journey film. It's like a road trip movie. But I'm really glad that you brought up Wes Anderson, because I was going to say the same thing, where he shoots everything. If you notice, he shoots everything straight on. You know how Wes Anderson shoots the camera straight on, and it's perfectly symmetrical on both sides. It's exactly what he does here. And the reason he's doing that is because I actually watched a YouTube. I need to put the YouTube video in the description, because there's a great YouTube video on Karel Zeman and the style he uses, which is called Mystimation. Mystimation is basically turning artwork into animation. And there's that. He does that a lot. He does that here with a paint and this is we didn't even talk about this. This is a Czechoslovakian director, Karel Zeman, and for this entire movie, he's doing he's recreating Zdeněk Burian's prehistoric paintings. He's this artist that did a bunch of realistic, scientifically accurate prehistoric paintings, and he's basically mimicking them exactly and then just animating them. And I'll throw a couple on the screen. I have some here and that I can pop up. But that's the biggest thing about Karel Zeman that I like the most, is he's and I put it in the title of the video. I don't know if you saw that, Connor, but he's just a master of mixed media. That's the biggest thing I wanted to talk to you about. This is This is like it's a live action movie technically, but it's 100% an animated movie. Like he uses every technique of animation. There's stop motion, like in the same shot. Like he'll go from stop motion. There's a shot of the mammoth that's like a puppet stuffed mammoth when they're from this side of it as they're going by, and then it cuts to the other side and it's a full stop motion mammoth and he's moving around and stuff. He also uses like hand drawn animation at some points, like with the giraffes. Do you remember the giraffes? I'll pop up a picture of those, but like when they're running by, that's all like real animation when they get to that time period. So if you don't know the movie, they're just going down a river basically, and there's no explanation for it. It's just pure fantasy, but they just go through all of the time periods of the history of Earth. So they first get to the Ice Age first, and they see like a mammoth and stuff, and they get a little bit further back, and they see a bunch of other animals, and they eventually get to dinosaurs. And like Connor said, they get all the way to the beginning of time and find the trilobite, which is what they were wanting to do. They're like a bunch of boys that are really into science and like Jules Verne, and they're writing their own book, and they're going back in time. It's really cool. But yeah, like I was saying, the flamingos, I'll throw those up. The flamingos are all stop motion, which is really cool. And then when you get to the dinosaurs, the stegosaur versus the allosaurus, I'm spoiling everything. I hope you've seen this movie because part of it is just going down and experiencing everything that the boys are experiencing. But when they get to them, and then the stegosaurus dies, and it's no longer stop motion. It's an actual full-size dinosaur that they're just like crawling on and like taking samples of and taking pictures with and everything. Like that was straight out of Jurassic Park. Like Spielberg had to be looking at this scene when they have the dead or the injured Triceratops, which is just a full size puppet Triceratops in the original Jurassic Park. But yeah, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me is just his use of animation and how he just merges every single style together. Even just paper cutouts. Like if you saw the Brontosaurus scene when they're going past it, it's literally just a paper cutout that they have placed perfectly in front of the camera, and just the head moves, which it doesn't take you out at all. It makes you feel like you're in it, but it also makes it look just like the paintings that he's trying to mimic, which is so cool. And even the way that he sets up the shots, like we said, straight on, and they're just going down the river, is just a brilliant setup because he has a perfect line right there to do the compositing. So you'll see all these like beautiful matte paintings in the background with all the mountains and everything, and it looks flawless because there's a perfect hard line where the river is. And you look at the behind the scenes, and it's just like guys holding up the mountains like in the right spot in front of the camera. It's so cool. I love that kind of classic filmmaking. What I was gonna say is the reason this is more my thing than Connor is just the stage of life I'm at. I am at a stage where my kids are very young, and I'm actively trying to set up a library for my kids to grow up with, and I want all of these classic films that they can grow up with that are just gonna like inspire their imagination and stuff. So when I saw these, I was like, my son has to watch these. I think every kid should grow up with these movies. I think they're amazing. But go ahead.
So I want to jump back to what you were talking about with the Jules Verne angle.
Yeah.
Earlier this month, I watched...
Nope, sorry, you froze a little bit.
This movie was not... I know, I saw that. I don't know why that is happening.
What'd you watch?
So earlier, this was not a part of the... This was a part of the Adventure Through November challenge, but I watched Around the World in 80 Days, the 1956 Best Picture winner. And that is also based on a Jules Verne novel, which came out the year after this movie came out. And it's just sort of interesting how that movie starts off with basically they just play almost the entire short film of A Trip to the Moon, the Georges Méliès silent classic, just right off the top. And and it's just crazy when you see that, and like they talk about how Jules Verne was sort of a futurist. He was sort of a prophet because of a lot of his speculative ideas became real, and it inspired imagination, and his like the imagination he inspired sort of influenced real life innovations. And when you get this came out the year before that, and that movie opens up talking about how cool Jules Verne was, and now they adapt one of his most popular books. This movie also opens up talking about Jules Verne and how cool he was, and how like some of the stuff he had thought up, like that all ended up becoming true innovations. And so it's interesting how they both sort of have similar prologues, but where Around the World in 80 Days was all about trying to make the most expensive spectacle money could buy at that time to be forward looking. This movie's looking back at the early, this feels like it's sort of made with the same mentality of the early George Méliès diorama kind of sort of interesting way. And I think the best way of looking at this is the way it handles color, because the color is very pale in this. There's a lot of I don't know, it looks almost like footage that was black and white that has been colorized. There's like a weird uncanniness to it, and I think it blends the live action and animated elements very, very well. And I think that's a large part in what's kind of helped hiding it, because when you were talking about them like the paper cutout of the Brontosaurus, that was a really cool thing, because it's like, okay, I know that body is not moving. It looks like a painting. The head is moving, and I know those kids are real because of their movements. And then it's like you see the head moving. I'm like, I can't see where the puppet stops and the body like painting begins. Like, I guess it's a cardboard cutout or like a paper cutout. But then you see the live action element on the river passing all the way through it. Like, you see it pass by, and it's like, I expected there to be a line that, you know, when you see the kids pass by it, like that, then it would cut. But it does cut, but then it cuts back, and you see them pass by the legs, pass by the neck, pass by the tail. Like, you see it all, and that was super impressive. And I liked that all that stuff was really neat. And a lot of what you were talking about, like, you're all about with this movie, the craft of it, and I can absolutely see why. And I think that the sort of old soul nature of how it's put together is very fascinating, and I think it's very smartly handled in bringing it to life. Now, I'm very, very excited to watch Invention for Destruction. I got a little bit of a tease of that because they do show early on those etched drawings from Jules Verne novels that you have told me that movie is meant to entirely resemble.
Yes, just the way he brings Burian's paintings to life in this movie. He brings Gustave Doré, also tying it back to Beauty and the Beast, which that movie was also based on, the art anyway, the cinematography. So this is, he basically takes all of Gustave Doré's illustrations that he did for the Verne books and completely just brings them to life, like everything. Like, they put a filter over everybody. We'll talk about that some other time, but the whole thing looks like those engravings, which is really cool. But really quick, so this was what Connor's talking about. They're going in front of the thing, so that's and this is like a really famous shot. That's why they used it for this. That's why I used it for the thumbnail, actually. But they go in front. So I'll show some of them here. I have actually some images I'll pull up while I'm talking. But yeah, so if you see it in this shot, when they go through, so that whole the mountains in the background are a matte painting, and then the boys are in an actual river going through here, and then there's a little like a I think they composite it. There's a layer on the front which has the mammoth here, which is like a puppet version. But then if you watch the very next shot, it's the same thing in reverse, and the mammoth is stop motion, and then that is a composite right there where they're going through the river in front again. So like the layering in the compositing is so good that it like you said, it ties everything together so perfectly. And like, children watching this especially will be entirely, I think, actually, I didn't even mention this. I watched this with my son this past time. I watched it. This is the second time I watched it this weekend, and he loved it. He's big into dinosaurs right now, so he was all into it. And even the other animals are really cool too. But talking about the kids really quick, can we give it up for these kids? Like, they're troopers, dude. Like, in the beginning, when they're going through the ice age, that's real ice. Like, if in the behind the scenes, they talk about how that was just like a frozen lake that they brought in a bomb squad and like blew up that so they could drive the boat through it, which is insane. I can't believe they had those kids like in a frozen wasteland pushing a boat. Like, those kids, and the kids are awesome the whole time. Like, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with them. And what was most, I think, interesting is that the youngest of them, I think, has the most to do from like an acting perspective. Like he's
Hmm.
asked to do the most, and I think he absolutely rises to the occasion. And I think like you could say there's like a stiltedness or an old timiness to their performance. I think the way the children are acting mirrors the way the entire movie is sort of assembled as well. Like there's a sort of unreality to kind of even the way they present themselves that seamlessly blends in with
Yeah, and you were
their
going to say, so
surroundings.
talking about Jirka, who is the youngest boy, who is my favorite character, by the way. He's awesome, and he doesn't care about nothing, and he just like does whatever he wants to do. So when he goes off, and they actually have this, we talked about it, they have this log book that they're logging everything in, and he does go off by himself, and they're all mad at him, and he like just wants to go off an adventure by himself, and he fights that lizard. You did get to see the part where he like fought off the lizard off the logbook, right? To get it back, the giant, yeah, the giant like
Yeah. The
Komodo
salamander
dragon
man.
thing.
Yeah.
So he fights it off and he brings it back, and they're all like they're all super mad at him, and because he walked off by himself, and they won't talk to him or anything. And it's a sweet moment. I'm sorry you missed it, but it is a sweet moment when they're all like, after they yell at him and like send him off over there by himself, and he's kind of like pouting. Then they realize Petra, who is the guy who's been keeping the logbook, he can't find the logbook, and he's like freaking out. And then Jirka brings it to him and gives it to him, and then they all make up. So you didn't miss too much, but it probably did cut up the rhythm a little bit of that scene. So I hate that happened to you, but then Jirka is also the kind of emotional thing at the end of the movie, where he had found a trilobite earlier in the movie, like a real one, as they were going down, or a fossil one as they're going back in time, and at the very end, they find a real trilobite, and they completely win over Jirka on the side, because Jirka, he's not really into like science. He was just more about his whole thing, which is amazing, is he just wants to see a mammoth. Like every time they see something to do with a mammoth, he wants to bring it home. He's like, can we bring it home as a pet? And they're like, no, what are you talking about? That's impossible. And then they find a mammoth tusk in the cave that the caveman's living in, that the hunter's living in, and he's like, can we carry it back? And like, it weighs 50 pounds. What are you talking about? So they keep shutting him down, but then he has like a change of heart at the end, and he just likes it for the sake of the scientific value of it, instead of just wanting the big cool dinosaur thing. So it's a really cool moment. I'm sorry again that it was ruined for you, the two cool moments with Jirka. But I mean, I think you still got the gist of it.
I think I did too. That was like one of my favorite parts is the part where they're in the cave and they see like it's the caveman's cave, and they talk about how savage he must be, how he's a hunter, he's a savage, and then they go to the walls and they see that this guy's a better artist than we are, and then they sort of have that moment of maybe he's not a savage, and it's this really sweet, understated moment. And I think that is sort of the nature of this. If you're expecting something, when people think about older movies, they tend to think like stage style acting, where people, the emotions are big and the movie is playing mostly broad, and it's kind of signaling to the rafters what the intentions are. This is not like that. This movie is very, I think, understated in its in the more complex emotional elements of it, and I think that is mostly just kind of due to they know who their audience is, and that's cool, because like it's cool to watch a movie that is for children in a way that's like by adults. It doesn't feel like the adults are like throwing it in, going, kids like loud noises, so let's make a movie with loud noises all the time. And it's not like that. It's interesting. There's a respect for children in how this movie's put together, and kind of how they're talking to those kids.
No, I 100%
admire
agree.
that.
I wish we still made. Sometimes we do, but I wish we still made children's movies like this, that adults don't have to claw their eyes out while they're watching it with their kids. Like it's made. His attention to detail is 100%. He doesn't cut any corners. He doesn't phone anything in. But it's just it's enchanting for kids. We use that word a bunch in the Beauty and the Beast one. I think this is pretty enchanting too, and in a completely different way. But he says right here, like if you've seen this because you have this, but right here, the opening quote from Karel Zeman is, "I have only one wish, to delight the eyes and heart of every child." What? How can you hate the guy? The guy's it's the best guy in the world. And that's how I feel too. That's why I'm trying to put together this library for my kids. But I will say, to the point that you mentioned, the reason why a bunch of Verne movies came out in the 50s is because that's when he hit public domain. So I just watched this a few days ago as part of my adventure through November. And this is Mysterious Island, also based on a Jules Verne book. Probably my favorite of the Harryhausen movies I've watched so far, except maybe Mighty Joe Young. And I also haven't seen Clash of the Titans or Jason the Argonauts, which are his big ones. But of the other ones that I've seen, this is really, really good. It actually has, that crazy evil bird that like just attacks Petra in this movie, and it's terrifying. That bird is also in this. It's a real prehistoric bird that they both use, which doesn't really make sense in this because it's not a prehistoric movie. But it was like in an earlier draft, so they just kept it in because they liked the bird. But anyway, that's a different movie. We'll talk about that another time. But yeah, that scene that scene was terrifying, and that was shot really well. Like the integration with the stop motion bird chasing him, and that was one part where they kind of break out of their just 2D viewing screen. It kind of cuts to behind him, and he's kind of running through the stuff and different. I don't know. This movie is just like a hodgepodge of all kinds of different things, and he pulls it together beautifully, which. I don't know. It really stood out for me, especially when I'm trying to collect kids movies. And there aren't that many in the Criterion Collection. It's basically this and like some Charlie Chaplin stuff and Buster Keaton, and so I pretty much tapped it. You'll see. We're about to do another Criterion Collection giant haul for everything we bought in November for the November sale. If you haven't bought anything yet, go out. It's still November. You have a whole nother week. Buy as much as you want because they're all half off right now. But yeah, so I've been trying to collect the Criterions, but they don't do a lot of animation. There's only a couple animation, and there's not that many movies that I can show my kids. So I'm really glad that they put this out.
It is really cool of them to do that. And thinking about if I was a little kid, watching this would be cool because there's another little kid who's going on adventures with the older kids, and that's kind of neat. But if you are more of like a 10, 11, 12-year-old. I don't know, maybe they would find this boring now, but seeing other kids having interests in science, and it's cool that they allowed these young like 12-year-olds to actually know stuff about science was really cool too. Like there's that part where they're talking about naming one of the creatures they see, and
ugliest thing ever.
He's a cool looking dude, all right. They were pretty mean to him, but and you were pretty mean to him too.
That is actually one of the paintings that he took straight from. So here, that's the image from the movie, and here's the painting, and it's the exact same monster or the exact same. Oh, awesome. That's really cool.
So yeah, so that's what I liked about that is he starts talking like, no, we have to call it something that we have to use like Greek or Latin, words that. When we use it and we send it to it, and another country looks at what it's called, they can know what it means just by the way it's spelled. And there's like a love of that's science, but it's also like trying to like teach children like a respective language and like why things have crazy names like that. And that probably, if I was a little kid, I'd be like, oh, that scene would probably stick out to me, and I would want to maybe look into Latin and Greek and like why words are spelt the way they are and like what the methodology behind that is. That's really cool. I didn't expect a movie. Like, I didn't expect this movie to do that, and it's really cool that they did.
Yeah, it's fascinating how important it is to him to get the science right in a fantasy movie. That's why I had trouble like explaining this to Connor when I was telling him about it for the first time, because I was like, it's technically a fantasy movie just because they don't give an explanation, but like the science is all accurate. Like it's talking about trilobites. Like what fantasy movie talks about trilobites? So yeah, it was really important for him to get all the. I don't know if you watched. There's some behind the scenes. They're kind of slim on the bonus features. I assume that's just because there's not much on these. Someone earlier asked why he's not more well known. All of his films were made when his country was under communism, and also during the Cold War. And so none of them really got out of the country as much. A couple of them came to Our Country. There's actually an American version on this Blu-ray. I don't know if you checked that out at all. So it did come here. I think it came under the same name. And then the other one, Invention for Destruction, came under called like The Adventures of Jules Verne or something. But his other films are a lot harder to find. But the American version of this kind of spoils what you were talking about, like how cool the science is kind of just dropped in here and there. The American version, and we didn't talk about this, there's like narration from the kid who's keeping the logbook, and he's like, there's an older actor doing the narration of him as he's grown up and he's looking back on this adventure, and they cut all that out in the American version, and they recast all the kids with American kids, but they only show them from the back, and it's like crappy American low budget 50s filmmaking, and they go to a museum. And they're like, and it's like way more in your face. They're like, look at this. And they're like, look at all these things at the museum. And then they leave the museum and get in a boat, just like in a park, and go under a little cave, a little bridge, but then it turns into a cave. And then they go back in time, and it's like, they just overcomplicated it and made it, I don't know. I'm glad you didn't watch the American version. It's also shorter. They cut out like 4 minutes. I don't know exactly what they cut out because I didn't watch the whole thing. But yeah, it was a little too cheesy for me.
See, that's interesting, and I think that is indicative of the different cultures. Yeah, because what I was expecting this to be, the kinds of children's adventure stuff, and I think maybe the reason I didn't seek out much fantasy or adventure stuff as a child is because I didn't like this common concept I saw, which was the kids go on the cool adventure, and then it was all a dream, or it was make believe, or like even like from the beginning, they might even show you their hand of, they get inside of a boat, and they go underneath a bridge, and the bridge turns into a cave. Like that to me just kind of reads like, oh, they're using their imaginations. Like, I can use my imagination. I got it. If I'm watching a movie, I want it to be real, though. And in this, they get to the beginning of time. They're like, it was pretty cool. We did that. There's no return journey. It doesn't, like, fade into the modern day. They're like, what's it? Yeah, they don't do the Wayne's World dilly-doos. Like, it's... Like, it was so cool. I'm like, and then it's over. Like, they got to the beginning of time. This was a journey to the beginning of time. Now it's over. How do they get back? Who cares? Like, that's cool to me. Like, if I had seen movies like this when I was younger, I think I would have liked adventure and fantasy movies more. I think the reason why I like something like The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and even like the Chronicles of Narnia, is that the fantasy worlds were real. The adventures they went on were real. And just because they go inside the wardrobe, it actually happens. And then they try going in it again, and it's closed off. It actually is there, and I like that. I like the ambiguity of Narnia. Now I can see it as like ambiguity, but go under the bridge. They go under the bridge, like you explaining that. I'm like, of course we did that. Of course that's the American version of it. Yeah, that's American fantasy.
And I didn't watch the ending, so I don't know how they did the ending, but I'm assuming it's the same thing where they just come back and they're back in the museum. But yeah, I also hated that growing up. Like, that's the reason it's okay for me. I don't know. Actually, I actually didn't like this. You know, in the Disney version of Alice in Wonderland, we do that same thing. We add, it was all a dream. I'm okay with that in Wizard of Oz because we did cool things with it. I also like the Wizard of Oz book where it's actually something that happened. But I'm okay with it in the movie because there's like cool, allegory things that they do with that, and all the characters match up with characters in the dream, so that's cool. But then after Wizard of Oz, we do it with everything in America, and yeah, I'm with you. It really bugs me. But I'm glad that you like this, and like I was gonna say earlier, you mentioned Wes Anderson, so I'll put this video in the description. But there's a guy who did a lot of research on this, and I'm glad I watched it because it was really interesting. He says that Terry Gilliam cites Karel Zeman as a huge influence on his work, and he also says that Tim Burton has talked about how much of a debt he owes to him, and he also mentions Jan Svankmajer, who keeps coming up on this channel. This is another Czech filmmaker from Czechoslovakia, so he was definitely very much influenced by his, like I said, the Mystimation kind of cinematic language that he uses, where he uses all of the different mixed media. But also Wes Anderson cites Terry Gilliam as a huge influence on him, and then Terry Gilliam was looking at Karel Zeman. So I definitely think, and in the video, if you watch it, he shows a lot of like there's some scenes from Life Aquatic that are like pulled straight out of Invention for Destruction, and then also some scenes from Grand Budapest Hotel that look exactly like scenes from Baron Munchausen. And I'm really excited for you to see those other two films. Baron Munchausen is like they're so different. I can't even really but Baron Munchausen is like a crazy drug trip, like color explosion, like this movie is the most straightforward of the three that are in this set, and I'm really excited to see your thoughts on the other two. But yeah, did this at least get you excited to check those out?
Yes, and you talk about how varied they are certainly intrigues me. I thought it was interesting that you mentioned Terry Gilliam, and that makes a lot of sense because Terry Gilliam in the 80s made a Baron Munchausen film.
Yes, he did go on to make a Baron Munchausen, and there's actually like straight up shot-for-shot references to this film in his version. And I really want to check that version out because I like Terry Gilliam. I just he has a couple Criterion movies. I watched Jabberwocky. I haven't bought that Criterion yet, but that's in the collection, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah, and that was interesting. That was a movie where the comedy was not for me because that's not like usually my comedy, but it was the weirdest experience because it was shot incredibly. Like I've never seen a comedy with that level of cinematography. Like it looks so beautiful. It was a really weird experience. It was like bathroom humor, but it looks incredible, and it was really weird.
Yeah, he's one of the Pythons, right? Like that's what his background is, and Monty Python is like, I don't know, in my head they're like the British Mel Brooks. They're more like a comedy troupe, but that's interesting because I know a lot of people don't like Jabberwocky. I don't know anything about that movie, and so you liking it makes me. Like,
it was a mixed bag. I will say that I liked how it looked, but yeah, it was a middle of the road, like right down the middle for me because the story and the comedy didn't hit as hard, but it looked awesome.
But Terry Gilliam is just like a creative, is somebody I really want to know, like watch more of his movies. I've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail because, I'm a white guy who lives in the United States. Of course, I've seen it. Who hasn't, right? But wait, have you not seen it?
No, I've not seen it.
Oh my god! Whatever, you're the outlier.
Now, I feel prejudiced now.
Yeah. All I'm saying is people will just assume you've seen it. That's all I'm saying. But I've not seen Brazil. I've not seen Time Bandits. I've not seen.
Oh, I've seen Time Bandits. Yeah.
I've not seen like a lot of his movies, and a lot of his movies are in the collection. And I want to start watching that stuff because I know that like I love David Lynch, and I know that Terry Gilliam is more satirical and he is more fantastical, and his touch is very different than Lynch's. But I know a lot of people. There's a big overlap in that Venn diagram of people who like Lynch and people who like Terry Gilliam. So I do want to get. I have a question for you, though.
Sure.
DJ.
Fire away, sir.
We got a lot of creatures in this movie. What is your favorite creature?
Oh, man. Oh, I'll have to flip through them now. I mean, a lot of them are the standards. Like, I like a good Stegosaurus and an Allosaurus as much as the next guy. And the mammoth is really cool. I'm going to go with the long neck. I call it I'm speaking Land Before Time terms because that's how I talked about dinosaurs with my kid. The Brontosaurus, just the way they did the Brontosaurus was really cool. I love that. Another way they are scientifically accurate with that is they have them in the water, and those dinosaurs literally had to walk in the water like most of their lives just to support their ridiculous weight. And that scene where he's in the water in front of them, that like you were talking about how crazy that looked. They're in the boat like just off here, and they're filming. I assume that was rear projection, and they're because if you could look, the footage of them looked a little more grainy than the footage of the dinosaur. But yeah, he's actually coming up out of the water like Loch Ness Monster style, and then they're literally drifting away, and it shows it from all angles. Like it shows them go by it, and then it shows them going away. That's actually another one. I'll show it here. That's another one of Burrien's paintings that he takes like straight off the page. Like it's a brontosaurus with the trees in front of him, his neck like reaching out over the water, and then there's some in the water. It's like straight off the page. It's really cool. But yeah, I like that. Also, I like the Stegosaurus because it was just a literal giant Stegosaurus that they were walking around on. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, I guess if I had to pick one, I'd go with the Brontosaurus. But I like dinosaurs. I was a dinosaur kid. I don't know if you were a dinosaur kid.
I remember my grandma got me Jurassic Park. Well, she got me Kangaroo Jack. She got Spencer Jurassic Park.
You got the short end of the stick.
Yes, I did.
Stay tuned for when the Criterion channel picks up Kangaroo Jack, and we'll be back. I actually saw that in the theater, I think.
I felt tricked when I finally watched Kangaroo Jack. I was like, the kangaroo doesn't talk? What's happening? This is just some crappy crime movie set in Australia.
No,
where everyone has the.
He talks in like one scene and like it's like a hallucination, yes, and they play that in the trailers.
It was all over the trailers. But it was my grandma's sister she got us some movies, and she's like, "Hey, kids like Kangaroo Jack, kids like dinosaurs, I guess." So. But I remember watching Jurassic Park was like the best thing ever, and Spencer and I got really into dinosaurs for like a little while, and so this did kind of scratch that like nostalgic itch for me in that regard. I do like dinosaurs as well, but I think my favorite were the pterodons.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot to mention that. Yeah, they literally attacked them on the boat.
Yeah, that was great. And I like that line where they only eat fish. So we're fine. And they're like, yeah, because there were no humans around.
Yeah, that was a great line. And just another subtle drop of some science knowledge there. But one thing I do want to mention, too, that never gets any love is woolly rhinos. Woolly mammoths get all the press. Woolly rhinos, there's a woolly rhino fight scene in this movie where the loser gets knocked off into the river and is like swimming along. That was really cool. I was like teaching my son about woolly rhinos, which I've never had the opportunity to do before, but that was great. I just love how many creatures were in this movie. Like, yes, the big thing about Ray Harryhausen is like he'll have these big huge monster fights, but there'll be like 3 or 4 in the whole movie at most. There's just creatures everywhere. Like this must have been a beast to try to film. I'd like to know how long it took him to do this.
That was something I liked about it too, because you're right. Like American films typically is in the B movies, they have like their handful of set pieces. Those are your big moments. That's where you bring up the creatures. This is completely different, and that was cool. I also like some of the fun bits. My favorite part of the movie was when the tiger shows up. It's like a jump scare, basically.
Oh yeah, what is that? A leopard or something in the
yes,
in the tree.
The leopard. One of the Zherka is just going in to, like wash his face or something, and the other kids, there's a leopard, look out! And then just immediately dives into the water and starts swimming.
Yeah, can we talk again about how cool these kids are? Like, I don't know if it's just kids from Czechoslovakia or if it's just kids from the 50s, but these are way more capable kids than I would ever be in the wild. Like, they're making a fire every night. They're like cooking their own food. They're building a raft when their boat gets stepped on by a brontosaurus. Like, what? I would die instantly.
Yeah. But I also like there's no irony in this movie, and I really appreciate the sincerity of that.
It's another thing we don't do in America. We don't play things completely straight like this, at least not anymore.
And I feel like this is like in the 50s. That's when like postmodernism might have been starting, and trying to like have some kind of self-referential humor. Where I am so conditioned that when you see a person pulling on a fishing rod, and they're like, there's some real resistance here. I think every time I've seen that in anything, they always pull up the fishing line, and it's like a tiny little fish, and you go,
or like a shoe or something.
Yeah, and then in this movie, they actually have a hard time pulling up the fishing pole, and it's a big fish. That's how sincere this movie is.
Yeah, and it was another sweet moment with Jirka, where he caught his first fish, and they were all like congratulating him and stuff. Like, So it's just a really sweet movie. Like, I know this is kind of a weird thing to do on Criterion, especially so early. We're only at number 3. But if you'll forgive me for another kind of family-friendly, simple story choice, I really enjoyed it. And if you want to kind of escape into childhood or for like an hour, it's really short too. It's kind of jam-packed. Like you said, it's really slow-paced, so it might lose some younger kids, but my son was okay with it. He's only 3. But yeah, if you just want to like go back to being a child again, or if you have children, definitely show them this. But if you don't, then you probably won't be into this, I would think. I think those are the 2 big categories that would be into this, if we're recommending it to certain audiences.
I would say if you're looking for a story, this is not really the best, I would say.
Yeah.
And I'll say what I mean. Like, the kind of stuff I would have liked to get out of this is more of that, oh wow, this caveman was probably like a thoughtful, in his own way, kind of being. I would have preferred more stuff like that. Like, a thought that comes to my head is that leopard shows up and everyone freaks out and they all jump onto the boat and try to get out of there. And the movie doesn't stop and have the kids look around and start laughing like, oh my gosh, that was crazy, right? Like, these kids don't have conversations, really. It's more of a travelogue, and the dialogue is only important to the immediate situations that are at hand. Like, we need to, like, the boat broke, now we need to build a raft, and then now they have a raft, and they're on their next step. And there's a lot of cool imagery, like them in the fog. It looks really cool, but yeah, I don't know, like, all that stuff looks really great, but I wish there was more, like, what are the conversations they're having on
that
the script?
scene, well, real quick about the fog, that scene, I think you're talking about the scene where they're watching the Stegosaurus and the Allosaurus fight from across the river, and it's like yellow and it's like the fog and everything. That was a really cool shot. But yeah, I think that's partly because of their age. Like, I don't know if they're having super deep conversations at this age, but you kind of have to set it at this age to capture like the wonderment. But also, it's just basically what it is. Right? It's like trying to capture that Jules Verne, just an adventure, hour and 30 minutes, get in and like just like a book in the kind of the best way, where it's just like, this is a chapter and this is a chapter and this chapter, and we just kind of go straight to the next chapter, and we don't really sit and talk about things very much. But which is why I think it's great for kids. And if you just want to, obviously, I said if you have kids or if you want to feel like a kid. Also, if you just enjoy animation at all, like if you want to look at the crafts or just craftsmanship of movies, or if you're a big Tim Burton or Terry Gilliam fan and you want to see who inspired them. But yeah, that's kind of the audience that it's reaching. These have kind of been a staple on the Criterion channel ever since I've had it. All 3 of these movies. And they're part of this collection on the Criterion channel called, I think it's called Independent Animation or something. Even though I don't think these are 2 independent films, but yeah, so they're all on there. And I think these definitely classify as animation films. Like I said, even though there's a lot of live action elements, they're definitely like a complete marriage of the 2. So if you do have the channel, and you don't have to buy a box set, then yeah, definitely check them out. I highly recommend them. But if not, like, if you're just a collector, the box set is beautiful, as we talked about before. So I think it's definitely worth it. Are you still glad that you picked it up?
Oh, absolutely. I really want to watch the Americanized version, just because, as someone who grew up watching Americanized Godzilla movies, that translation is always a curiosity I have. There's a cool 2019 interview with like an animator talking about this movie that I want to watch. I want to watch the bonus features on this. It really sucks about the skippage on the disc. I wish that wasn't there. But yeah, no, it's just like, even as a package and like kind of just what this is, I like that. You talked about this is in that independent animation, and I don't know how Czechoslovakia was, or if that was just the Czech Republic, or maybe it was, I don't know what it was, but in 1955. But I don't know how they were operating under communism, but I know in like Russia, for example, you can't have an independent movie because the film industry and just like filmmaking as a trade was supported by the state. So like if you wanted to have a movie made, it needed to go through, that's how you got finances, was through the state.
Yeah.
And so because they're what's that?
I was totally wrong. It's called art house animation.
Okay,
so that makes more sense.
Absolutely. So I was like, I wonder how independent factors into that. But
yeah, well, and one of the things that was a bummer is like his entire career was under communism, so he didn't make any money, or like he made money, but he didn't get like he was not compensated at all. Mm-hmm. No matter how good his movies did, and some of them did make it over here and were successful in the States, he didn't get anything from it. Which is a bummer, but it's also cool because he was such a cool guy that he put all this effort into getting his films like perfect with that attention to detail, and it wasn't motivated by money at all. He's just a really cool guy. Like if you watch the bonus features, he was like an advertising designer, like putting window displays up, and he won like an award for like the best window display. And then they came out and started they wanted to do like a commercial on his work, and he showed them some of his animations that he'd been doing in his house. He like taught himself the process of animation by looking at some Felix the Cat films under a microscope, like looking at every single frame and studying how they changed. He's just a really cool guy. There's a Karel Zeman museum in Czechoslovakia that I would love to go to someday. I've seen yeah, it's and actually all the bonus features on this Blu-ray are from that museum. The I don't know if you looked at them, but the supplements are like, there's like 6 different little short videos that were made by the museum. So that's where, like, if it wasn't for those, there would barely be any supplements on here. But they're all from that museum.
That's really cool.
Which is really cool.
That's awesome. I'm glad they were able to put this all together.
Yeah, I don't know how this came together. I hope we can get some more of his films someday. It's probably never going to happen. This is probably just a once in a lifetime. But yeah, there's some other films. He was a big Jules Verne fan. Apparently he did 2 other Jules Verne movies along with Invention for Destruction. And he's got some other fantasy movies that I really want to check out. I've been looking on eBay. Someone has like 8 of his films, but it's including these 3, so it's only 5 ones. And it's like $85, and it's just a DVD. And I'm like, I might have to pull the trigger someday, because if they're even Region A, I don't even know if they're Region A. But yeah, someday I'll check out the rest of his films, hopefully.
Yeah, I certainly would. I'm excited to dive into these next 2, and I'm not sure how. The way the kind of communist state was established, like what their film preservation looked like. I don't know how much better or worse it is than in America, because in America it was notoriously not very good for a time, and now it's pretty darn good, but we need like salt mines in order to do that. And so like as far as like a restoration and like the way this movie looks, it looks great, and especially on this Blu-ray. I'm not exactly sure what the restoration was all about. I guess there's a little description at the bottom here that says about the restoration. Yeah.
And there's also a short little like 2-minute video on this Blu-ray, but it's just like before and after screens. Like it shows how bad they were, and the fact that they look so good is really, really impressive. And there's also there's some cool things. There's another one where they go back to the locations that he shot this at, and you can like see them how they actually look in like present day, and it's really cool. But yeah, check out the supplements. I think you'll enjoy those. They're real short. You can probably get through them all in like 30 minutes. So it's interesting.
I like the little. I guess just going back to the story, just a couple more points I wanted to say. I like the caveman gag, where What's his name? Tonin. What's his name?
Tonic.
They always say Tonica or something whenever they're calling.
Yeah, there's something weird with the language where whenever they say their name, they add like an A at the end. I don't know. I don't speak Czechoslovakian, obviously, but yeah, that was throwing me, because in the subtitles it would say Tonik, but then they would say Tonika.
But yeah, Tonik falls in. He's the photographer, and that.
Yeah, which we didn't mention at all, but that was really cool.
By the way, that was.
And I was so glad that we didn't do the American thing where he drops his camera in the mud like halfway through the movie or something, and it's ruined.
Well, and I liked that touch because it was. It was like off the top, it was sweet, because I liked seeing how here's a picture of all of us. Tonik's not here because he's taking the picture, but his shadow's in the picture. Like,
yeah, that was so.
That's
that was. That's how the film opens. Like I said, when he's doing his narration, it's really cool.
But then,
it's just if you're a softie like me and Connor, man, this movie will get you.
but then later,
and if you have brothers, I think if you have brothers is another big thing.
That's true.
I have 2 younger brothers. You have kind of 2 younger brothers.
I have one technically older brother.
Oh, okay.
We're twins. We're twins, really. And then one significantly younger brother. He's like 8-9 years younger than me.
Same.
But he, but anyways, Tonik falls into the mud pit, and he has a spear that he finds, and then he's just kind of wandering along. And they're like, "Oh!" It's the other 3, as he's kind of wandering back to the shore. They're like, "It's a caveman. We gotta hide." And that's around the time they see a couple of other dinosaurs fighting. And I want to say, yes, the Stegosaurus is awesome. I really like that bit. I liked how there was a Stegosaurus fighting another thing, and it's like an actual fight that they get into. I guess as far as the creature, the creatures per capita in this, it really approaches King Kong levels, is what I'm saying. And I don't doubt King Kong was a big influence on this. But
yeah, and Lost World especially.
Mm-hmm. And so if you're reminding me of King Kong, you're doing something right, I would say.
Yeah. Definitely. This goes up there. Like when I finally make there's a huge lack of children's or family friendly like lists on Letterboxd. Like I've tried to look them up and they're like terrible, or there's like none. Like when I finally make my definitive like library 100 movies or whatever that you must show your children as they grow up, like this is definitely going to be on there. Lost World's going to be on there, King Kong, like all that stuff, because my son has already seen all those and he loves all of them. But he's only 3, so he's going to forget them, and then he's going to have to re-experience them again when he has actual memories. But
he loves Kiki, all right? He has seen Kiki at least 100 times already, right?
He loves Kiki, Totoro, all that stuff. But yeah, like you said, I love that this is just, like you look at the cast, that's all it is. It's just those 4 boys. Like, they carry the whole film. Like, there's nothing else. There's nothing going for it. And that scene where they think he's the caveman, and that went on for the perfect amount. Like, it didn't go on long enough where you're like, oh, we have to... Because we already know, because we saw him fall in the mud. So it's just handled so perfectly. And all I can think of is, like, how bad it would be done if we did it here, where it's like, that's like a 10-minute scene, and they're, like, running away, and he's like, no, come back. And, like, it's just expertly done. I think that's why this is in the collection. Also because he's like so inspirational to modern filmmakers, but also just because it's a simple story, but it's done like flawlessly. You know, same thing we were saying with Beauty and the Beast. Like he elevates it so much more than the story, which is what I love about it. Just how much care and detail he puts in.
And this is very much one of those. This is like a word that gets thrown around a lot, but this is an auteur thing. That like nobody else besides this guy, I don't think would have said, okay, here's what we're doing. There's no studio head or person working at the government saying, okay, here's what we need. I got this vision for a Jules Verne inspired journey to the beginning of time. It'll sort of be like a diorama. We really want to include all these different... Nobody's saying that. That's like this guy wanting that and making it happen. And the identity of the filmmaker is so present while you're watching it. And it's one of those things where he's not in front of the movie waving his arms back and forth saying, look at me. He is sort of in front of the audience saying, okay, come with me into this imagination that I love so much. And you're aware of the filmmaker, but the filmmaker enhances the experience as opposed to taking away from it with how noticeable they are.
Yeah, and you'll see, like, eventually when I want to show you the other 2 movies in here, there's nothing else like this guy's stuff. Like, it's 100% one of a kind. Like, it's a little bit of Georges Méliès, like you said, a little bit of King Kong Lost World, but, like, 100% his own stamp on it. And you can't look, like, I don't think you could look at a frame of one of his movies and not know it's one of his movies. I don't think you could pull out a frame.
Well, to that point you're talking about, like, we think about, like, for me anyways, the way I've thought about this when I was a teenager into my young adult years is that, oh, you got Scorsese and Spielberg and Lucas and all of them, and they were really taking the 1950s directors like your, Greg Cooker and Frank Capra and Victor Fleming and all those people, and they saw what they were doing, but they really got to be the first auteurs, right? They really got to kind of, and at least in America, they really got to break the studio system down and, sort of bring the independent scene to the mainstream, basically. Like they were the mainstream studios were funding the crazy visions of these filmmakers. But it's kind of, easy to get into that headspace of we this is a privilege we're only now experiencing, when it's really not. Like, we have this guy looking back even in the 50s at the filmmakers that inspired him and kind of remixing their work, but also putting his own spin on it. Because like what he's doing in the mid 1950s, that's what Tarantino's doing in the 90s. That's what Edgar Wright's doing right now. Like, that's what a lot of filmmakers have done for generations, and it's so cool to see it so early.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think that's pretty much our piece on it. Great little ending there. I did not honestly expect us to talk this long about it, but I guess it's impossible for us to talk about anything for longer or for shorter than an hour. So I'm glad it was a really good conversation. I'm glad we had it. I didn't know where this was going to go when we first started. So thanks for joining me again. Any other closing statements? I think you just gave a pretty good closing statement, but if there's anything else you wanted to say about it.
Well, just thanks for having me on again. Thank you for, I guess, turning me on to this movie and this set of movies, because I'm excited to go further, but I'm glad we were able to talk about this, because I like hearing you talk about this kind of stuff, because your sensibilities in this field are like, it's a complete blind spot for me. And so having you as my guide has been kind of exciting, because you know this stuff much more than I do, and I'm glad to have the education.
Yeah, and it's been a very new interest for me too, pretty much ever since I've had kids, honestly. I wasn't that big into it. A lot of these adventure movies I'm doing for November are brand new. I haven't seen any of these. I'm actually having a pretty good November. I know you said you weren't seeing as many as you wanted to, but I'm getting through my box sets. I've got a few more of the Harryhausen's to get through. If you're interested in that, we're going to do a follow-up video to the Adventure Through November challenge, where we kind of count down our top 10 adventure movies, not just this month, but kind of all the movies we've seen, just to make it a little more interesting. And we're also going to do another movie challenge in December on Christmas movies, if Connor's still down. I don't know how his schedule's going to be, but I'd love to do that with him. And we got a lot of videos coming out. Like I said, we got to do the Criterion update, which I'm looking right here at this giant stack of Criterions that I just bought that I haven't put on the shelf yet, because I'm saving them for that video. I spent way too much this month, so I've got a lot of stuff to show you guys. And we're also going to be doing a Blu-ray update video, just in general for the last couple months, things we've gotten that aren't the Criterion. So we've got a jam-packed December. Stay tuned here on the Welder channel if you want to learn a lot about just Blu-rays or movies in general that we've been buying or that we recommend for you guys to check out. And we will be back at you again next week for another video, and we hope you join us. Thanks again for joining me, Connor. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in the next Criterion Corner, where I think you're going to pick a movie for us to check out. So hopefully you're thinking about that. It might be, well, I don't know. I was going to say it might be after the new year, but we might be able to sneak one in December if you can think of something that would fit. So, yeah, I'm down for that. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you guys later in the next video. Bye, guys.